My name is Aliyah February, and I'm honored to be moderating this session today. I am a business development and marketing professional with a background in the legal industry, and also the founder of Nubianet. I want to welcome you all today to this webinar on the theme, the State of AML Compliance in Nigeria 2024. Today we have some distinguished members of from the finance and the legal industry who will be discussing on our panel session, and also a few key information that you'll be receiving from the Regfyl team. This webinar is organized by Regfyl, and you'll be hearing shortly from the Regfyl team as well. So I want to especially welcome you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us today for the discussions. Before I proceed with the introduction of our panelists, I would like to state that all personal and professional thoughts and opinions of the speakers today do not reflect the views of their employers. So they'll be speaking in a personal capacity. Just wanted to put that out as a caveat. So I'll get right in. In introducing our panelists, I'd like to start with Ajibola Asolo, PhD, or Dr. Ajibola Asolo. He is a partner in ALN Nigeria Aluko Anoyebode, and he's followed by Aditola Adeleye. She is the head of legal at First Ally Asset Management, and also Aminat Dakeje, who is the head of legal and compliance at NigerPay. So I welcome you all. They're on standby right now to go into the various topics for discussion in the panel session. But before that happens, I would like to bring on the founder and CEO of Regfyl, that is Babatunde Ibidapobe. So I'll be handing over to him to give more of an introduction into the Regfyl platform, and also to talk about the reports, which you'll be hearing more about, and give you some key insights into the compliance industry reports released by Regfyl.
Thank you, Ali, and thanks to everyone for joining. I know that it's a busy time, so I appreciate that. We appreciate you joining us on this webinar. This part of Regfyl, I'm sure some of you already know about Regfyl, so it'll be very brief. So about Regfyl, we are, Ali, can you just go to the next slide, please? We are an all-in-one platform for AML and compliance in Africa. We are able to help our customers simplify their AML, fraud prevention, and regulatory compliance requirements. Next slide, please. The way that we do that is we support our customers across the entire compliance lifecycle, from onboarding, where we provide customer screening and company screening, to our transaction monitoring engine, which we built as a proprietary transaction engine, and then to regulatory reporting, where our customers have a consolidated view of all their compliance obligations. Next slide, please. We are experts in compliance and technology. So my background is I'm quite close to you guys. So the people that are lawyers on the call, I might have a legal background, over 15 years of experience in the legal and compliance space. My CTO, Tomiwa, he is the tech person. He has a varied background in AI and machine learning. And so that is the team. We are VC backed. And so these are some of our investors. So yeah, if you want to hear a bit more about Regfyl, please reach out to me or reach out to us, hello@Regfyl or babatunde@regfyl.com. Now, to the order of the day, let's talk about this report that we spent a lot of time and effort trying to draw out these insights. First thing I want to do is just kind of talk about the methodology for how we kind of gathered this information. Next slide, please. What we did is we asked one key question to everyone who participated, which is, what is the biggest challenge you are facing on a day-to-day basis in your AML and CFT compliance in Nigeria today? The target profile of the people that we were reaching out to were individuals who are holding key roles in compliance, risk management, and regulatory affairs across various financial institutions in Nigeria. That includes commercial banks, microfinance banks, fintech companies, and capital market operators. The way that we collected this data was exclusively via LinkedIn. We reached out to the target profiles on LinkedIn via direct messaging. Next slide, please. And then the sample size, we reached out to over 300 people. Not everybody responded. I think there's a number of people that responded that are on this call, so thank you so much. 134 people responded. That's about 44% of the people who we reached out to. It was open for a 4-week period, and so it was a 1-month engagement period. And we continued to engage with the participants, encouraging thoughtful and comprehensive responses. We had follow-up conversations with certain individuals, and then we did messaging and also via video calls. And this helped us to provide deeper insights into the specific challenges and to clarify any ambiguities that we saw in the responses. Next slide, please. The way that we analyzed the data was a mix of quantitative and qualitative analysis. The quantitative was to understand the prevalence of specific challenges, while for the qualitative, it was to extract detailed insights and actionable recommendations. We then analyzed and cross-referenced this against industry reports to make sure that we were on the right track, and also regulatory guidelines. So this multi-layered approach enabled us to produce a report that we think reflects both the real-world experiences of professionals in Nigeria and also provides practical insights for improving compliance practices. I have to say that we did have some limitations, and it's important that we call that out. So obviously, this methodology relies heavily on self-reported LinkedIn data. This also means that it might not necessarily represent the view of the entire industry professionals, and especially those that are not active on social media. So not everybody has a LinkedIn profile. Also important to call out is that because it was self-reporting, this also creates the risk of response bias. So if, for instance, people might reflect their aspirations rather than their actual practices. Now, however, despite these limitations, we feel that the LinkedIn-driven insights offer a valuable perspective on AML compliance in Nigeria. Next slide, please. So you all get a copy. Everyone that's on this call will get a copy of the report after this. It's a 40-page report. And the first section that we looked at was effectively what are the key regulatory events that have happened since January 2023. We identified 13 of them, and these have been significant events. Some of them, the top 4, in my personal opinion, number 1 was the FATF gray listing of Nigeria in February 2023. That's the Financial Action Task Force. That has created seismic effects across the entire industry, and that happened in February of last year. The next, and kind of linked to that, was the launch of the National AML CFT strategy in March of 2023. That was also a very important event. And then linked to that was then the CBN taking action against a number of microfinance banks, primary mortgage banks, and finance companies in May of 2023, where effectively about 140 or so of them had their license revoked. And I think that kind of flows from specific challenges that they were having with their AML and compliance obligations. And then very swiftly, I guess in February 2024, then the CBN then took action against licensed BDCs as well. So those were 4 key regulatory actions that happened over the last 18 months. Then we also saw a rash of KYC related CBN guidance notes. We had the ones on ultimate beneficial owners. We had the ones on politically exposed persons, and then we had the ones on tier 1 wallets and the profiling on the ICAD database with NIBs. So these were some of the regulatory events that happened majorly by CBN, but SEC wasn't left out. The Securities and Exchange Commission also put out its framework on the Accelerated Regulatory Incubation Program. This was for the onboarding of virtual assets providers, service providers. And so there was a lot of stuff that happened. And that kind of flows into what the industry challenges that we identified in our survey. So if you please go to the next slide, please. The challenge, so I'll just pause now and then I'm going to put up a poll. It should come up on your screen now. So in your opinion, how effective do you think that the current AML CFT regulatory framework in Nigeria is in combating financial crimes? I'll leave that poll open for a bit while I then go to, so I'll leave it on for another 30, 45 seconds. Ali, please can you go to the next slide, please? And so the challenges that we identified, they kind of range from a number of different things. I mentioned that the the point about the regulatory changes, that was one of the biggest things. 22% of the people who responded to the survey said that keeping up with regulatory changes and the complexity around it is one of their biggest challenges. The respondents specifically said that they struggle with the rapidly changing regulations, they struggle with interpreting and implementing new rules, and they struggle with managing compliance across multiple jurisdictions. Finally, they said that the challenges in implementing new regulations also exist because of the stringent timeframes that they have to within which to implement these changes. So keeping up with regulatory changes was a big challenge that was mentioned. Another one was identifying politically exposed persons. And even though we know that this sits more broadly within KYC, we brought that out because it was something that was always recurring. Respondents said that there was a lack of comprehensive centralized PEP database in Nigeria, and that was creating problems for them. They had difficulty in identifying relatives and close associates of PEPs, as most of the people on the call will know that the PEP is not just the primary individual, but also their relatives and close associates. And they also identified challenges in determining the PEP status of Nigerians in the Nigerian context. Things like, oh, is it PEP once a PEP, always a PEP, that kind of thing. So that was another challenge that was identified. 18% of the people who responded charged that as one of their biggest challenges. The next was around data quality and was around technology and tools. Respondents to the survey highlighted the fact that there was a lack of efficient tools for compliance processes. The people who did use technology saw a high rate of false positives in screening and monitoring systems. And especially when you have legacy systems, there were issues around implementing legacy systems with new systems. So these were the things that people that identified challenges in the technology space said. So I'm just going to pause now and just pull up the response to the poll. The majority of the people feel like almost 50% feel that the Nigerian regulatory framework is somewhat effective, followed closely by 25% that say it's not very effective. Interesting. 5% have said it's ineffective completely. So I'll stop sharing the results of the polls. Interesting results there. And then I'll go back to the insights that we got from the challenge from the survey. So as I mentioned, technology was a big challenge. Linked to technology is data quality and management. Respondents to the survey said that there were issues around inaccurate or incomplete customer information, and that is really around how the data is gathered. There were difficulties in verifying the information that the customers provided because unfortunately sometimes the customers lie, and so there's no way to verify what they've actually said is the case. There's also the issue of the lack of standardization of data collection and storage across multiple organizations, especially people that have different entities, operating entities. And then obviously we're seeing things around privacy and compliance challenges. We have the new NDPB and its requirements. And so a lot of people are seeing that privacy is becoming more and more important around data quality and management. Finally, we go to KYC again. In KYC, the issues around customer due diligence and KYC processes reared its head again. We had issues around difficulties in verifying customer addresses, and that's a big thing. I know that the CBN has also very recently been making a big fuss about that as well. So it's something that's important that people are seeing. So verifying customer addresses, the challenges in identifying ultimate beneficial owners, especially when you have a situation where a customer is a business customer that is owned by one of the shareholders is another company. It's difficult for them to do the identify the ultimate beneficial owners. We saw resistance from customers in providing the required documentation, and then also the difficulties in verifying information for non-resident customers. So those were some of the issues that we saw around customer due diligence and KYC processes. There's also a very important thing around and I think about how many percent? 14% of the people identified this as an issue, which is around balancing the need between compliance requirements and business objectives. Some of the respondents said that stakeholders perceive compliance as a business killer, that there's pressure from management to streamline compliance processes, but then they don't want that to affect how growth targets. So the kind of the back and forth between the business and compliance is something that a number of people identified. 14% of our survey participants identified as issues. And then finally, I'll come to continuing professional development and training issues. A number of professionals have said that there's limited budget for compliance activities. And I think that's kind of linked to the point that some people say that compliance is a is a cost center, and so they don't necessarily want to put more costs into the cost center. So we have limited budgets for compliance activities. We have difficulties in finding and retaining skilled compliance staff because it is a skill, it's a profession. It's not something that someone can just wake up and say, I'm a compliance, I'm doing compliance. You have to kind of train and then be well skilled in that regard. And so there are also difficulties in finding specialized training programs, and there's challenges in retaining the skilled compliance staff that you have. And so those are some of the challenges that were identified in the survey. Obviously, this is very high level, and when you get the results, when you get the survey, you'll be able to see in more detail. So yeah, please, next slide, please, which is another quick poll, if you don't mind. I'm launching it right now. So how prepared do you believe that your organization is to handle emerging AML CFT threats? Good. And just to call it out, we have currently about just under 100 people on this right now. So thank you so much to everybody for joining. I'll give it another 25 seconds, and just looking at the scores, it looks like most people feel that they're very prepared, which is interesting. That's good to know. I'll just give it 10 more seconds, and then I'll end the poll, and then we'll move to our expert panelists. Okay, so I'm going to just share the results of this. And then, so yeah, thank you so much. Like I said, everyone that is on this call will get a report, the copy of the report. It will be sent to your email. If you don't get it by email, then you can find it on our LinkedIn page. But yeah, it's very, very, very detailed, and we are very proud of it. And once again, thank you to everyone who contributed to the survey. And yeah, hope you find it useful in your day-to-day task as in compliance. I'll hand it over back to Ali now so that he can tee up our panelists.
Thank you, Babatunde, for that insightful breakdown of the report. Please look out for it in the email you used to register for this event. So I'll move on now to the panel session. And the first on our lineup is Aminat Dakeje. She's the head of legal and compliance at NigerPay. We are pleased to have you here today. And I would like to ask the question, effective customer due diligence. How can compliance teams surmount these challenges? So over to you, Aminat.
Thank you very much, Ali. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's quite comforting to know that despite all the challenges that have been identified, majority of folks in the audience believe that they're very prepared for any AML threats. A number of challenges have been identified as the survey results clearly shows. And because of time, I'd just like to focus on the problem of address verification and risk-based approach to customer due diligence. As we know, CBN wants to know where you live. So essentially, it requires financial institution to verify the physical addresses of their customers. The challenge here really is more from the angle of balancing business and compliance needs. As Tunde rightly mentioned, a lot of institutions believe that compliance is just a cost center and you're just demanding money for one tool or the other. They're not quite convinced about whether it is necessary for you to do certain things that the regulator itself has considered mandatory. So really, it's not so much about not knowing what to do to verify addresses. It's more from a cost perspective. The average cost of physical address verification ranges between, I think, 1.5 to 2.5 per customer. And with the risk of having to re-verify if it fails, meaning you have to pay again. So imagine a customer or, an institution looking to acquire about 1 million customers. So this itself is going to come to like a huge cost. And when you also consider the other onboarding costs that the business has to, bear, identity verification cost and all of that, then it really does come to a huge cost to the institution. And this really is the challenge, And as a compliance professional, this is something that you have to deal with. I mean, constantly reminding your institution that this is a regulatory requirement and there are sanctions attached to non-compliance, right? So that is really the problem with address verification. Talking about risk-based approach to customer due diligence. This is something that is required by extant AML regulations. And simply put, risk-based approach requires that financial institution put in place specific measures and controls that are commensurate with the AML, the money laundering and terrorism financing risk that the business faces, right? So it is tailor-made rather than, having like a checklist approach to customer due diligence. And I suspect that the problem here really is operationalizing RBA when it comes to CDD, right? And to really the strategy, especially as recommended by the regulator, is to first undertake a comprehensive risk assessment of the business, right? If you, for example, you're looking to acquire 100 customers, not all 100 people will pose the same, level of risk to your business, right? Because there'll be different customer types looking to access different products and services. They operate from different jurisdictions. The channel of delivery of the product to them would not be the same, most likely. And because of this, you would have to, take a risk-based approach. And this essentially requires you to assess the risk that the customer poses to your business critically from 4 primary risk metrics. And this includes, evaluating the customer type. There are some customers that by default are high-risk customers. You have PEP, you have cash-intensive businesses as examples. However, the customer type alone does not define, the risk that customers present to your business. You also have to consider the products and services that you're offering. Your typical savings products will not rate the same as, let's say, an investment product or a product that allows customers to do instant wire transfers with minimal oversight by the institution, for example. You also have to consider the geographical location of the business itself, as well as the customers, right? And you also have to consider the channel of delivery of the product. For example, if you have non-face-to-face customers, you have to specifically implement measures that will be commensurate with the channel of delivery. As clearly stated in extant regulations for non-face-to-face customers, you have to implement measures to ensure that the customer is who he say he is, for example, right? And this leads to, implementing some technological tools that allows you to do liveness check, multi-factor authentication to ensure that whoever is presenting, themselves to you as a customer is actually who they say it is, and there is no identity theft and all of that. So it's the combination of, a critical assessment of all of these metrics that would let you know whether a customer poses high, medium, or low risk to your business. And this is what would, guide the CDD measures that you would undertake with regards to the customer. So with low risk customers, you know that you do your simplified DD. With medium risk customers, you do your standardized due diligence, and of course, enhanced due diligence for high risk customers, right? So having a risk-based approach to customer due diligence is actually much more preferable, even though I can appreciate the challenge of implementing this. And this exercise is not strictly restricted to the compliance team. It requires insights, valuable insights from other internal stakeholders of the institution. You have to get the insights of your risk team, your fraud team, and more importantly, your data team, because it has to be data-driven, right? Because this is, like I said, it's tailor-made. It's something that you have to do for your institution, and it won't look the same for 2 institutions, right? So, can you still hear me? I think I have a glitch. Okay,
Yes,
thank
we
you.
can hear you.
So, yeah, so essentially, this is what is required, right? And it's also required that after the initial customer due diligence, you have to implement measures to do ongoing CDD for your customers. Because the customer that started out as a low-risk customer may not necessarily remain the same throughout the tenure of the relationship. For example, you can have a customer, a local storefront owner that sells provision, right? And after your initial assessment, the customer turns out to be low risk. Down the line, your ongoing due diligence will help you see whether the account activity of the customer clearly aligns with your knowledge of that customer, right? So this is what ongoing due diligence do, and it helps, institutions effectively manage, their compliance risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Aminat, for that brilliant explanation. So we'll be moving on now. If you have any questions for Aminat or for any of the panelists who'll be speaking shortly, please type them in the chat box, and we will be getting to them towards the end. So thank you once again, Aminat. The next question, which goes to Aditola Adeleye. She's the head of legal for First Ally Asset Management. So the question is, how can businesses balance compliance requirements with business objectives? So I'll call on Aditola now to come on and answer that for us.
All right, thank you, Ali. Good afternoon, everyone. Please confirm you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Right, thank you so much. Thank you to the Regfyl team for having me. So the way I'll answer this question is to start by saying that compliance keeps business operating. And of course, our client-facing team, our colleagues in the sales team, they get us compensated. So we need both equally. And like you rightly said when you started the session, there's often this back and forth between the client-facing team. That's our colleagues in the sales department, depending on the organization where we work. And of course, those of us in the back office, so you have the guys in compliance, in risk, in legal, and of course in audits. So there's always this back and forth. Okay, you guys are still doing the business, you are now allowing us to do all of these things, but we understand that compliance keeps the business operating, of course, because once your license has been maybe withdrawn by your regulator, there's no business to operate at all. So the first point is to know that compliance keeps the business operating, while our colleagues in the client-facing departments, the team, sales team, and all, they get us compensated, and we need both equally. So what we just need to do, the hack is to balance both interests, to see how we can balance all the interests that we have in place. And the next point I'd like to talk about is to understand that there's no one-size-fits-all at all. I know I may not mention that as well. And compliance will depend on your organization type, the size, and of course, the regulatory obligations that you have. Take, for example, if you go into the capital market, the compliance obligation of an issuing house or a trustee is, of course, relatively different from the compliance obligation of a portfolio or fund manager. So you just have to look at what are my own compliance obligations and what is the probability that this will actually crystallize. Take, for example, you can still use the capital market space as an example. If you're filing AML returns for an issuing house, you mostly have like new returns, right? Because the activities are not in that space. Whereby a fund or portfolio manager, you may, let me just, maybe you have some things to report on. So again, specific requirements will vary depending on your industry, the type of business that you run, and of course, the regulatory obligations. So now going into how we can balance this interest. Like I said, there is no one-size-fits-all at all. So the first is for both teams now. So the guys in client-facing team, and of course, the back office, the risk management, legal, compliance, and audit to sit together to see how they can adopt a collaborative approach. So there has to be this collaborative approach between, of course, the client-facing team, sales, marketing, relationship managers, account officers, as opposed to having like policing approach. I know in the organization, you tend to see people say, oh, you guys in compliance, you guys in legal, you're stifling us, you're not allowing us to make business and all of that. So it's just to change from the policing approach to collaborative approach. And in doing that, the first thing is to listen to the stories from the product managers, your sales team, they are the ones going out there, the marketing team, the account officer, listen to their story, right? Understand the proposal that they have in place. Then ask for clarification where you're not sure this is what they're saying, or additional information where necessary. And of course, it's very important that you challenge the assumption where necessary. have a round table discussion. I won't say that people are more reasonable when you have them in the room and you're talking face to face, as opposed to, send email. So just have this sit down session with them, right? Challenge their assumption, then also offer alternative and create workable solutions. The answer will not outrightly be no. I know there are instances where you can have, okay, this is no, but again, just try and offer alternative and create workable solution based on your own understanding. You explore and propose workable solutions to ensure that the business achieve its own objective without contravening applicable laws and regulation. Then basically what you're trying to do is you are advance the idea, whatever it is that the product manager is bringing forward, or the relationship guys, the marketing team, the sales team, whatever it is they are bringing forward, you advance their idea within the ambit of the law. Then it's very important that you define the risk and of course the consequences. Then also examine what's the probability that this risk is actually going to crystallize. Just to be sure that it's not something that you just have in your head that this is going to happen. So like I said, have a collaborative approach, listen to the product managers, and of course, understand their proposal, challenge their assumptions, create workable solutions or alternative. Then the next is to act as liaison with the regulators, just understand them more. Proactively engage the regulator before you launch the product. So if you are thinking of, okay, we want to have this line of products, how about you having the conversation with your regulator just to run it by them, maybe informally or even formally, we have that avenue to say, this is what we're trying to do, and this is how we're trying to do about it. I know that Babatunde's touched on that earlier on. I know the SEC has this regulatory incubation program. They want to hear from you. What is it that you're trying to bring into the market? So you can influence the regulators that way to be more receptive to innovative business initiative. Take, for example, 2 years ago, we didn't have digital sub-broker license in Nigeria, but a market operator, right, approached the SEC, and that license was actually created. So it's very important that before you even have a product launch, you engage them proactively, and that way you can influence them to be more receptive. If you cannot do this as a market operator, you can also do it through your trade association if you have one. Just go as a bunch, and that way, from the rules making top committee of your trade association, you can influence them as well. Now, having addressed maybe my colleague in the back office, it's also important for our client-facing colleagues to understand what's the implication and impact of non-compliance on the objective of the organization. I know we want to meet our budget. We have all these lofty goals, KPIs that we want to meet. We want to go to NPRs and be able to say, oh, we've met our target for this. But we should bear in mind that without the license, right, we will not be in business. And like I said earlier, the arc is to balance both interests. Compliance keep the business operating, while the sales guys, they also get us compensated. So we need them equally. And just to mention that, again, that there's no one size fits all. And in trying to balance interest, right, just try and use what you have. Then you can scale. As you scale and move forward, you can now begin to use other products as well. And let me wrap up by saying that I don't see compliance or legal or risk or auditors stifling business. I see us as Department of Revenue Protection. At the end of the year, we want to be sure that that revenue that our colleagues in the client-facing department have made, right, we are protecting it. And when it's time to share bonus, we can all smile. Thank you.
Thank you, Adetola. Thank you for that. And I mean, I know that a lot of us have a bit of questions or comments that you want to send to our panelists. Please do that. The chat box is open currently. And without wasting much time, I would like to move on to our third panelist, who is Mr. or Dr. I would say, Dr. Ajibola Asolo. He is a partner at ALN Nigeria and everybody. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Ali.
So for the question, it goes, how can compliance professionals keep up to date with regulatory changes?
Yeah, thank you once again, Ali, and many thanks to the Regfyl team for inviting me to this session. I'll just pick it up from where Adetola kind of left off, which is, just speaking to regulatory compliance in general. It's in total a system where you construct in corporate life, which essentially positions you to discharge your extant obligations to your regulatory bodies, whether it be across the capital markets, whether it be financial services, etc. and it's relevant from the conceptualization stage of a business to execution and the operationalization life cycle of the business. And it comes to play from thinking about the kind of entity you incorporate in line with the proposed objects of a business and the objectives of the promoters. The extent of a share capital, regulatory capital, which will be informed by things like whether there's foreign participation or otherwise, and the sector-specific regulations that might apply to your area, and most crucially, the actual license to actually discharge the business you want to discharge. So that's just speaking to regulatory compliance in general. I'm moving to second thrust of your question, which is regulatory change. As has been alluded to by the previous speakers, panelists, essentially regulators are always constantly looking to react to business and operating environment to ensure that the environment is operational and how the regulatees is relevant to changes in innovation in the market. So CBN, for example, will be concerned on an ongoing basis with notions like systemic risk, financial stability, inflation, etc. While a regulatory entity like the SEC will be concerned with notions like investor protection, market integrity, and things of that nature. So it's these concepts within the relevant regulatory space that inform the kind of regulatory change we see. And regulatory change is often driven by the introduction of new laws and regulations or the amendments of existing laws and regulations. So using the banking space as an example again, we know that the CBN recently issued a circular pertaining to capital requirements for deposit money banks in Nigeria, which they have to essentially abide by 2026, which means that in the interim, in fact, we're seeing now a lot of equity capital raise activity by some of the deposit money banks in the country, and subsequently, we're probably going to see some M&A play amongst the tier 2 banks. Alluded to again the crypto space. I think both Detola and Tunde alluded to this. The SEC is reacting to innovation in the crypto space. They recently issued a regulatory incubation program, which is designed to just deal with VASPs and DISPs in the crypto space. So I guess the point is how regulated entities conduct their business within the perimeter of what's lawful against the backdrop of all these changes is essentially the core of regulatory compliance and its exact function of compliance officers. And again, it's probably one of the things that entities like Regfyl are built to solve. So to the heart of the question as to how to keep abreast of regulatory changes, essentially a number of things that compliance officers can do. I think the first step I would point to would be just ensuring that you're engaging with competent outside counsel as a starting point. And when I say competent outside counsel, I also use this term to extend to specialist compliance support as well. The primary rationale here would just be that when you're dealing with people that are competent, they're able to help you discharge your obligations in an effective manner. And these people, as part of their capability, will often have extensive, long-standing relationships with regulators such as the SEC, the CBN, FRS, ETC, FRCN, and they'll often have first-hand information as to changes in the regulatory environment. This will essentially help keep you informed, help keep you tapped in, so you know what's coming. You posture well to react, and no one's caught flat-footed. So that'll be the first recommendation I make. The second recommendation I would make would be just implementing a robust and comprehensive regulatory engagement program. So what this entails essentially would be that as a compliance professional within any organization, you should have a dashboard where you dimension the entire universe of your regulatory stakeholders, and you're touching base with them from time to time with relevant functions, whether it be SEC, whether it be FRC, and whether it be CBN. And so you can stay tapped in, you can stay informed, you know what's going on. And in addition to this, most regulatory agencies in Nigeria and outside would often engage with their regulatees regularly. It's crucial that compliance professionals within companies stay involved in organizations like this and stay active at fora like this. So the SEC, for example, does something called the CMC on a quarterly basis. I think they engage with the entire universe of their regulatees. Clearly, compliance professionals should stay tapped into fora like that. The CBN2 does things like that. Very recently at the 2024 spring IMF meetings, the CBN particularly engaged with IMTOs just to hold conversations as to how they could discharge some of the or ameliorate some of the issues in the foreign currency markets. So, forums and stakeholder sessions like that, compliance officials, compliance officers and organizations should stay involved so they can stay tapped in, know what's going on, and just stay in front of things. Detola alluded to trade associations. This is a good one as well. We need to stay active, whether it be, pen up, fintech, NGR, etc. So you know what's going on and you can react accordingly. A third point I would allude to would just be monitoring the relevant dissemination channels that regulatory agencies maintain. So oftentimes the SEC, CBN, FIRS, everyone, every agency tends to issue exposure drafts for their circulars and their guidelines and ask for comments. It's crucial that compliance officials within organizations stay tapped in, they respond in a robust manner. Oftentimes you need to help practicalize the consequence of regulations for the regulated entities so that they can calibrate them accordingly. This is a good one as well. So obviously monitor the platforms, monitor social media handles, and so you can react accordingly. In addition to these three things I've mentioned, there are other practical things, just like listening to podcasts, keeping abreast of what's going on in the regulatory environment locally and internationally, subscribing to newsletters of reputable law firms like the Crown Body, attending conferences and webinars such as this, deploying RegTech solutions, and just general legislative tracking. And as I said earlier, just staying abreast of what's going on locally and internationally, because regulators in Nigeria and outside tend to take a comparative approach to regulating their regulated spheres. So oftentimes when you see changes occurring in the US or the UK, for example, as we've seen in the crypto space, we're seeing those changes ripple and mirror across our jurisdiction as well. So just bringing it all together, regulatory compliance is a critical function within any regulated entity, and the key thing to staying abreast of this is just staying tapped in deliberately. So I think I'll just stop there at this point. Thanks, Ali.
I just want to thank everyone for taking the time out to join us. I'll let you do the final words, closing remarks.
Yeah, same as I said. Thank you so much. Regfyl, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to instill a culture of compliance and do our part to protect and provide that. So once again, if you have any technology needs, whether it's on customer onboarding, whether for individuals or for businesses, whether it's for transaction monitoring or for fraud prevention or just general regulatory reporting, give us a call, send us an email to see what we have. We are very, very cost effective. We're built for the African and Nigerian markets. So yes, please reach out to us. We'll be waiting to hear from you. Thank you so much.